All right, diving right in. We got a fascinating request for a deep dive this time around, and it's one of those topics that always seems to get people fired up, you know what I mean? Gender identity.
Yeah, it's definitely a subject that tends to spark a lot of debate.
And sometimes, honestly, I feel like the more we talk about it, the less we actually understand. But that's why you're here. Our listeners sent in some really thought-provoking stuff about gender-neutral bathrooms, legal battles, all that.
Right, right. And those are important discussions to have for sure, but they often miss the very personal, very human side
Yeah.
of gender identity.
Absolutely. So let's zoom in on that for a second. I mean, where do we even begin with understanding gender identity? It's not as simple as just checking a box, is it?
Not at all. It's about how we see ourselves, right? Deep down, it's about our internal sense of being male, female, somewhere in between. Maybe even completely outside those categories.
It's more than just like what you feel like on any given day, though, right?
Right, exactly. It's not just about clothes or hairstyles. It's deeper than that.
Okay, so if it's not just a choice, how does it work?
Well, there's this growing body of scientific evidence suggesting there's a biological component to gender identity.
Oh, you mean like that study our listener sent, the one about brain activity?
Exactly. That one really throws a wrench in the whole nature versus nurture debate. Transgender individuals' brains actually showed activity patterns more aligned with their affirmed gender rather than the sex they were assigned at birth.
Wow, that's wild. It almost makes you wonder if it's like being, say, left-handed. People used to think you could just train that out of someone.
It's a compelling comparison. And speaking of challenging traditional views, we also have to talk about the ethical considerations surrounding adolescence and gender identity.
Yeah, that article you sent about puberty blockers, I gotta be honest, it raised more questions than answers for me.
It's a tough one. On one side, you have folks arguing that these blockers give young people the time and space to figure themselves out before those permanent physical changes from puberty kick in.
Which, let's be real, puberty is a roller coaster on its own, without adding all this to it.
Exactly. But then, on the flip side, you have the concern about the potential long-term effects of these medications. We're talking physical, emotional, the whole nine yards.
So where do we go from there? It feels like a lose-lose situation sometimes.
Well, the key really is open and honest conversations. The adolescent, their parents, the healthcare providers, everyone needs to be on the same page. It's about making informed decisions together with all the facts.
And trust, right. There needs to be a lot of trust between everyone involved.
Couldn't agree more. It makes me think about this amazing anecdote our listener shared about the Bugis culture in Indonesia. They have this whole other understanding of gender, totally different from ours. They recognize 5 genders.
5? You're kidding.
Nope. And one of them, the Bishu, are often seen as spiritual leaders. Can you imagine that?
It really makes you realize how much our culture shapes the way we see the world, even when it comes to something as personal as gender.
Absolutely. So the question is, as we become more aware of this spectrum of gender identity, are we going to see a shift? Will society become more inclusive, more accepting of fluidity? Or are we going to see a push in the other direction, back to more rigid definitions?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I wish I had a crystal ball.
Me too.
Uh,
But I do think that by having these conversations, by being open to learning and understanding, we're taking a step in the right direction.
I agree. And to our listener, thanks for bringing this topic to the table. This deep dive barely scratches the surface, but we hope it gives you some things to think about, to maybe see things from a different perspective.
It's a journey, that's for sure. And like with any journey, it's all about keeping an open mind. Who knows what we'll discover along the way?